The Sunday dinner tradition at the Maxwell family penthouse had always been an exercise in subtle humiliation. Every week, my sister Victoria would host the family in her exclusive top-floor apartment, never missing a chance to remind me that I was lucky to live in the same building, even if it was just in a small studio on the fourth floor. I sat at the elaborate dining table watching my family's familiar dynamics play out. Victoria presiding at the head, my parents flanking her like loyal courtiers, and me, Alexander Maxwell, the family disappointment, relegated to the far end beside the kitchen door. "Did you hear about the new ownership?" Victoria announced, delicately cutting into her roast. "Apparently some investment group bought the entire building. They're planning to make it even more exclusive." I hid my smile behind my wine glass. Of course I'd heard about it. I had signed the papers myself 3 months ago, using one of my holding companies to maintain anonymity. "Really?" Mom leaned forward, always eager for building gossip. "I heard they're planning extensive renovations." "The lobby could certainly use updating," Dad added, as if he were personally consulted on such matters. Victoria nodded importantly. "My friend on the building board says they're raising the minimum income requirements for new tenants. About time if you ask me. We need to maintain certain standards." All three of them glanced meaningfully in my direction. I kept eating, used to these pointed comments about my supposed lack of success. What they didn't know was that while they thought I was barely scraping by as a computer programmer, I had built quantum securities into one of the most successful cybersecurity firms in the country. The small consulting jobs I mentioned at these dinners were actually million-dollar contracts with Fortune 500 companies. "Speaking of standards," Victoria continued, her voice taking on that familiar condescending tone. "Alexander, we need to discuss your living situation." "Here it comes," I thought, taking another sip of wine. A $500 bottle I'd brought that they'd assumed was cheap because it came from me. "The new ownership group is implementing stricter residency requirements," she explained, as if talking to a child. "Background checks, income verification, the works. Maybe it's time you started looking for something more appropriate for your situation." My situation. I kept my voice neutral, enjoying the irony too much to be offended. "Well, darling," Mom interjected with false sympathy, "we all know you're doing your best with your little computer work, but this building is becoming quite exclusive. The monthly maintenance fees alone." "I manage," I said simply. Victoria laughed, that practiced, patronizing laugh she'd perfected over years of looking down on others. "Alexander, be realistic. You live in a studio apartment and drive a 5-year-old car. There's no shame in admitting this building is out of your league." If she only knew that I owned not just this building, but 3 others in the city. That 5-year-old car was actually one of 12 vehicles in my collection, chosen specifically to maintain my cover. "The new owners are planning to convert the 4th floor to additional amenity space anyway," Dad added. "You'll have to move eventually." I raised an eyebrow. "Where did you hear that?" "I have my sources," Victoria said smugly. "As a penthouse owner, I'm privy to certain information." I fought back a smile, knowing that no such plans existed. In fact, I had just approved a multi-million-dollar renovation of the 4th floor apartments, including my own humble studio that was actually 3 units combined into a state-of-the-art smart home. "Perhaps you could help Alexander find a nice place in one of the outer boroughs," Mom suggested to Victoria. "Something more suited to his means." Victoria brightened at the chance to further demonstrate her superiority. "I know a darling little building in Queens. The neighborhood is improving." I checked my phone discreetly, seeing messages from my executive team about the building renovation plans. The irony of the timing was perfect. "Actually," I said, reaching for my briefcase, "I've been meaning to discuss some changes with all of you." "Oh, have you finally decided to get a real job?" Victoria asked. I could talk to Harrison about an entry-level position at his firm. Harrison, her investment banker husband, who managed a portfolio worth a fraction of what I controlled. The same Harrison who'd tried to pitch my company's board last month, not realizing his brother-in-law was the founder and CEO he was so eager to meet. "Not exactly," I replied, pulling out a leather folder. "I wanted to share some news about the building's new ownership." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "We already covered that, Alexander. The point is, you need to start looking for new accommodations before." "Before what?" I interrupted, something I rarely did. "Before the new owner decides to renovate." Before the residency requirements change. Before the building becomes too exclusive for someone like me. My family exchanged concerned looks, probably worried I was about to make a scene. Now son, Dad began in his patronizing voice. There's no need to get defensive. We're only thinking of your best interests. Of course you are, I agreed, opening the folder. Just like I'm thinking of yours. What does that mean? Victoria demanded, her perfectly plucked eyebrows drawing together. I pulled out the first document. The building's new ownership papers. It means that as the new owner I should probably discuss the actual renovation plans with my tenants. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's face went through several interesting color changes. That's not funny, Alexander. Victoria finally managed. I'm not joking. I laid out more papers. Architectural plans, contracts, permits. Quantum Holdings completed the purchase 3 months ago. We're planning some significant upgrades, but don't worry, the 4th floor isn't going anywhere. Quantum Holdings, Dad's voice was faint. But that's my company, yes. I enjoyed watching the realization spread across their faces. Well, one of them. The parent company is Quantum Securities. You might have heard of it. We just made the Fortune 500 list. Victoria grabbed the ownership papers, her hands shaking slightly as she read. This is impossible. You're a programmer. You live in a studio apartment. You drive a Toyota. I'm actually the founder and CEO of a multinational cybersecurity firm. I corrected. I live in a 3,000 square foot custom smart home. And I drive whatever I feel like from my collection, though I prefer to keep things low key. Mom had gone very pale. But all these years, I let you believe what you wanted to believe, I finished for her. It was simpler that way. More peaceful. Why didn't you tell us? Dad demanded, finding his voice at last. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. When I started my company, you all told me I was throwing my life away. When I moved into this building, you assumed I could barely afford it. Every success I mentioned was dismissed as playing with computers, so I stopped mentioning them. Victoria was still staring at the papers, her face a mixture of shock and dawning horror. These renovations, the new requirements, don't worry. I assured her, though part of me enjoyed her discomfort. Current tenants are grandfathered in. Though I am implementing some new rules about how residents treat their neighbors. The implications of that statement hung in the air. Years of condescension, of subtle and not so subtle put-downs, of being treated like the family failure, all while I secretly owned the roof over their heads. Now, I continued, pulling out more documents, about those renovation plans. I thought you might be interested in seeing them, since they'll affect your units too. Our units? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, the penthouses are getting a complete upgrade. New smart home systems, expanded terraces, the works. Victoria, I assume you'll want to be temporarily relocated during the construction. My sister, who had spent years lording her penthouse over me, just nodded mutely. I've arranged for comparable units in one of my other buildings. The Four Seasons has agreed to handle the transition. I slid a hotel brochure across the table. Unless you'd prefer the Ritz. Dad picked up the brochure with trembling hands. The Four Seasons, Alexander, we had no idea. That was rather the point, I said, standing up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a video conference with our Tokyo office. Victoria, the contractors will be contacting you about the renovation schedule. Mom, Dad, my assistant will be in touch about your temporary accommodations. I gathered my papers, tucking them back into the briefcase. Oh, and Victoria, about those new building standards, don't worry. I'm sure you'll manage to meet them. I'm nothing if not understanding of people's these situations. The look on her face was priceless, years of superiority crumbling in an instant as she realized her struggling brother had been her landlord all along. Next Sunday dinner will be at my place, I announced, heading for the door. The real one, not the studio you think I live in. I'll send a car service. The building's private entrance can be a bit tricky to find. I left them sitting there, still stunned into silence. In the private elevator, the one Victoria didn't even know existed, I pulled out my phone and checked the security feed. They hadn't moved, just sat staring at each other as their world reorganized itself around this new reality. My assistant, Sarah, was waiting in the lobby. "How did it go?" "About as expected," I replied, heading for the private garage, where my actual car, a custom Aston Martin, was waiting. "Schedule a meeting with the interior designers for tomorrow. I think it's time to start those renovations. And your family, give them a few days to process. Then send over the full portfolio, all the properties, the company financials, everything. Might as well get it all out in the open now." As we drove away, I glanced up at the penthouse windows. Victoria was standing there, watching my car disappear into the night. For the first time in years, she was seeing me clearly, not as her struggling younger brother, but as the man who had succeeded beyond her wildest assumptions. Next Sunday's dinner would certainly be interesting. The week following my revelation was delightfully chaotic. My family's reactions, captured perfectly by the building's security systems, ranged from denial to desperate attempts to rewrite history. Victoria tried calling me 17 times on Monday alone. I watched through the security feeds as she paced her penthouse, alternating between rage and panic, as she finally read through the full renovation plans my office had delivered. Her precious penthouse would be undergoing a 3-month transformation, and there wasn't a thing she could do about it. Tuesday morning, I was reviewing contracts in my real office, the entire 50th floor of the Quantum Securities building downtown, when Sarah buzzed in. "Your father is in the lobby, sir. He's been trying to convince security he's related to you for the past hour." I pulled up the lobby camera feed. Dad stood there in his best suit, the one he wore to impress clients at his small accounting firm, waving his driver's license at the security team. "Send him up," I said, then added, "Use the glass elevator." The glass elevator was a particular point of pride, a transparent capsule that rose up the building's exterior, offering increasingly dramatic views of the city. I watched Dad's face as he ascended, his expression shifting from determination to awe, as he realized the true scope of what his son had built. When he finally entered my office, he looked shell-shocked. "Quite a view, isn't it?" I gestured to the wall of windows behind my desk. "You can see your accounting firm from here. Small world." "Alexander," he started then stopped, taking in the massive office with its modern art and cutting-edge technology. This is really all yours." "This?" I smiled. "This is just my office. Would you like to see the rest of the building?" Without waiting for an answer, I pressed a button on my desk. The wall behind me transformed into an interactive display, showing Quantum Security's global operations. Dozens of offices, thousands of employees, billions in revenue. "Your little computer business," Dad said faintly, recognizing his own dismissive words from years of Sunday dinners. "Would you like to know what happened to that first client you told me not to waste my time on?" I pulled up another display. "That small job you said wouldn't pay the bills." The renovation crews arrived at dawn the following Monday. I watched through the security feeds as Victoria made one last desperate attempt to stop them, waving papers she claimed were from her lawyer. "Miss Day, Maxwell," my head of security said calmly, "those documents were already reviewed and dismissed by Quantum Holdings' legal team. Would you like to speak with them again?" Victoria's face crumpled as another moving crew arrived. "But this is my home. And it's my building," I said, stepping out of the private elevator. "The Four Seasons suite is ready. The movers will handle everything." She spun to face me, and for a moment I saw something unfamiliar in her expression. Fear. Not of me, exactly, but of the shifting power dynamic she couldn't control. "You can't just this isn't," she sputtered. "Actually, I can, and it is." I handed her a folder. "Here's your new lease agreement, effective after renovations. You might want to review the terms carefully." She opened the folder and I watched her face pale. This is triple the current rent, market rate for a luxury penthouse in a premium building," I explained. "Don't worry, your current rate is locked in for 60 days after renovations. Plenty of time to decide if you want to stay or find something more appropriate for your situation." Her own words from countless Sunday dinners thrown back at her. She flinched. "How long?" she whispered. "How long have you owned the building?" 2 years, I replied. "I bought it right after you tried to have me evicted." "Interesting timing, wouldn't you say?" The moving crew waited patiently as Victoria processed this information. Around us, other residents were being escorted to their temporary accommodations, all handled with the discreet efficiency that marked every Quantum Holdings operation. Your things will be moved to the Four Seasons, I continued. Unless you'd prefer to handle the arrangements yourself. She shook her head mutely, finally accepting the inevitable. As she turned to leave, she paused. The Sunday dinners will continue, I said. But not like before. No more comments about my career, my choices, or my situation. In fact, consider every Sunday dinner from now on a reminder of exactly who you've been looking down on all these years. The renovation work began in earnest once the building was cleared. I moved between my various properties, overseeing the transformation of what would become one of the city's most exclusive addresses. Dad tried calling several times that week. I let the calls go to voicemail, each message more desperate than the last, as he realized the full scope of my success. Son, I've been looking at the portfolio you showed me. We need to talk about investment opportunities. Alexander, your mother and I have been thinking about retirement planning. Please call me back. I'd like to discuss some business ideas. I had Sarah forward each message to my legal team, documenting the sudden shift in their attitude now that they knew about my wealth. Mom took a different approach. She sent a lengthy email, full of apologies and explanations. We never meant to hurt you. We were trying to protect you. If we'd only known, I replied with a single line. That's exactly the problem. You never tried to know. The Four Seasons reported that Victoria was making excessive demands, trying to maintain her illusion of importance. I let her run up the room service bills, curious to see how long she'd continue pretending nothing had changed. 2 weeks into the renovations, I invited them all to tour the progress. The penthouse level had been completely gutted, the dated luxury replaced with cutting-edge design and technology. Your new home, I told Victoria, gesturing to the space, if you choose to stay. Full smart home integration, custom security, and a few features you didn't know existed. I pressed a button, and hidden panels opened to reveal a private pool and garden terrace. Amenities she'd never known were possible in her own penthouse. This was here all along, she asked faintly. No, I added it, along with about 30 million and other improvements you'll discover if you can afford the new lease. Mom and Dad stood quietly, watching their daughter face the reality of her new position, a tenant who might not be able to afford her own home anymore. The building's value has tripled since I bought it, I continued casually. Thanks in part to the success of Quantum Securities. You know that hobby you all told me to give up on. Son, Dad started, but I held up a hand. Save it. I'm not interested in your business proposals or investment ideas. I'm not here to be your personal ATM or financial advisor. I'm here to make one thing very clear. Our relationship moving forward will be strictly professional, landlord and tenants. But we're family. Mom protested. Family. I laughed. Family doesn't spend years undermining someone's dreams. Family doesn't try to have someone evicted. Family doesn't treat success as a surprise plot twist. Victoria had wandered to the windows, staring out at the city. I can't afford this new rent, she admitted quietly. I know, I replied. That's rather the point. How does it feel to be the one worried about meeting building standards now? She turned back, tears in her eyes. I was horrible to you. Yes, you were. All of you were. And now you get to live with that knowledge every time you look up at this building, whether you stay or go. What do you want from us? Dad asked. Nothing. I have everything I need. The question is, what are you going to do now that you can't pretend I'm the family failure anymore? The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Years of condescension, of dismissal, of casual cruelty, all of it stood exposed in the harsh light of success they couldn't deny or diminish. The renovation will take another 2 months, I said, heading for the door. You have until then to decide if you want to stay, at market rates, or find somewhere else to live. Either way, the Sunday dinners continue, at my place, on my terms. And what terms are those? Victoria asked. I smiled. Simple. You all get to sit at the far end of the table, next to the kitchen door, while I remind you weekly of everything you were too proud to see. Think of it as a learning experience. As I left them standing in the gutted penthouse, I heard Mom start to cry. But for the first time in years, I felt no obligation to comfort her. They had made their choices. drawn their conclusions, and now they would live with the consequences, just like I had lived with their judgment all those years while building an empire under their noses. 2 months passed quickly. The renovations transformed the building into something even Victoria, with all her pretensions, had never imagined possible. The Sunday dinners continued, but now in my real apartment, with my family seated exactly where they had once made me sit, at the far end of the table, watching others enjoy their superiority. On the final inspection day, I stood in the lobby, watching the last touches being completed. Victoria appeared from the Four Seasons car service, clutching an envelope I recognized, her decision about the new lease. "I can't afford it," she said simply, holding out the envelope. "Not even close." "I know," I replied, not taking it. "Your salary would cover about 1/3 of the new rent." Interesting how perspectives change, isn't it? She flinched but held her ground. "I found a place in Murray Hill. It's nice. Normal, like the places you used to tell me to look at when you wanted me out of here." "I deserve that," she admitted. "I deserve all of this." Mom and Dad arrived then, also carrying envelopes. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, all of them standing in my lobby, holding their surrender papers. "We're moving to Connecticut," Dad announced. "Selling the accounting firm. It's time to retire anyway." I nodded, having already known this from my financial team's reports. They'd been quietly liquidating assets, preparing for their exit from a building they could no longer pretend to belong in. "Before you all leave," I said, "let's have one final dinner. For closure." They followed me to my apartment, no longer shocked by its luxury, but still uncomfortable in its grandeur. The table was set exactly as it had been for all those years of Sunday dinners, except now they were the ones looking up its length from the far end. "I had an interesting meeting yesterday," I began as the first course was served. "The Petersons came to pitch quantum securities for their investment fund. They didn't realize who I was until halfway through the presentation." Victoria winced, remembering how often she'd invited the Petersons to mock my career choices over dinner. "Life has a way of coming full circle," I continued. "They're now desperately trying to get their clients into my buildings, the same buildings they once said I was foolish to invest in." "We were all wrong about you," Mom said quietly. "No," I corrected, "you were wrong about yourselves. You thought your small successes made you superior. You never imagined someone could surpass you so completely, while you were busy looking down on them." The meal continued in silence until dessert arrived. Then I pulled out 3 envelopes of my own. "Your new leases," I said, sliding them across the table. "Different terms than the ones you rejected." They opened the envelopes cautiously. Victoria gasped. This is below market rate," she said, staring at the papers. "Consider it a family discount. With conditions." "What conditions?" Dad asked. "First, these rates are contingent on better behavior. One snide comment about anyone in this building, one attempt to lord your status over others, and you're out. No appeals, no second chances." They nodded quickly. "Second, the Sunday dinners continue, but as equals. No more power plays, no more subtle digs, no more pretense." "And third?" Mom asked. "Third, you have to earn it, not with money, but with change. Real change. I've arranged for each of you to mentor young entrepreneurs through Quantum Startup Program. You'll help people achieve their dreams instead of mocking them." "Why give us another chance at all?" Victoria asked. I stood and walked to the windows, looking out at my city. "Because success without growth is just revenge. I've proven my point. Now it's time to see if you can prove yours. And if we fail." Dad's voice was quiet.